Hi, I'm Dr. Chase Cunningham. I'm a principal analyst and vice president with Forrester Research. I work on the security and risk team, and primarily I cover zero trust solutions and zero trust strategy. So, that being said, what we're going to try and get through today is a quick run through on what we're considering a remote workforce zero trust technology solutions demo. Now, Forrester typically hasn't done many things in the way of demonstrating technology, but we feel that this is so important because we're getting the question so often that I'm going to run you through deploying a few of these solutions, seeing what they look like on the end user machine so that you can understand what you can expect and you'll be able to communicate better with your end users, the folks in those remote workforce positions, what they should be paying attention to and what they should expect as they put these solutions into place. So the reason that we're doing this is if you consider what a typical home office kind of looks like, this is a relatively emblematic environment. Now, this is obviously not everyone's all the time system, but this is pretty similar to what you could mostly expect. Typical home office, you're going to have a wireless router, you're going to have something provided by the ISP, it's going to go out to the internet, you're going to have an end user machine, you're going to have phones, you're going to have other IoT type devices, whatnot. We're not going to get specifically into the IoT side of this, but we're going to talk about deploying solutions on the endpoint and on the phone that will help you know what to expect for those end users. Now, the reason that we're doing this is because when you think about what that home office looks like, pretty simple, end user machine, router, ISP, internet. What we're really getting into is the issue with that remote workforce, remote home office, touching your network, your company, your corporate infrastructure through the internet. So as you can see here, where I was on that previous slide, the remote home office user, there's my remote worker going through the internet, hitting a modem or switch or router or ISP, whatever, provided for the company, into the company firewall or DMZ. Usually there'll be more than one firewall, going in and porting itself over towards the VPN, which was going to be authenticated on that end user machine. So now I have a direct pipe from my remote machine all the way into the corporate infrastructure. And you can see that behind that VPN access server, everything that's there within that company is available to me. Now, depending on how that architecture has been built and how the security controls are applied, I may not be able to move laterally, hopefully. However, if there's a misconfiguration, I might have administrative credentials on things that you didn't know about, which could be a problem. And I probably have excessive privileges. So we're going to figure out how these solutions help us limit that, role-based access control, those type of things. Now, there are a lot of, quote, zero trust solutions on the market. And the reason I quote that is because we don't typically talk about specific of zero trust technology, but because we're in a world of post-COVID and everyone's remote, we need to talk about how those solutions enable zero trust strategy. This is what the market kind of looks like for the majority of these solutions that are applicable in this scenario. Software-defined networking or SDN, SDP, software-defined perimeter, MFA single sign-on, which is multi-factor auth and single sign-on, and device health checking, making sure that my device is patched, is up to par, is not going to cause an infection. So the reason we're doing that is we need to secure the remote worker in their home office now, because in the context of enabling zero trust for our infrastructure, everyone is way outside of the enterprise. Everyone is way outside the bounds of our typical perimeter-based control. We have no choice but to start figuring out how we apply these controls to those remote end users, remote workforce, remote home offices. Now, if we do this correctly, we can get towards this sort of tagline of never trusting, always verifying. Again, this is not about a human thing. This is not an emotion of we don't trust our employees. That's not what we're saying at all. This is about a technology implementation of removing one of the key components of compromises, which is trust relationships within infrastructure based on things like passwords and VPNs and technologies. That's a human emotion. That is not a computer or internet or IT basic control. So the demonstration that we're getting into is based on this sort of strategic definition of ZT. Strategically focused on addressing lateral threat movement. We don't want things to move laterally within that network. We're okay with you going from your remote machine through this software-defined networking, software-defined perimeter, whichever one it may be, to the asset you need to get to do your job. But that's it. We're not going to allow lateral movement. We dang sure don't want lateral threats moving. We're going to leverage micro-segmentation and granular enforcement. And when we say micro-segmentation and granular enforcement, we mean that at the grand context. We mean my phone is isolated from the network. My apps are isolated from other applications and database things that they don't need to get to. My accounts are isolated. I have granular control of all that. I can basically work off of my entitlements, my roles, those things to lock it down and keep you from doing things that you shouldn't do, because it's probably likely that you will have a compromised endpoint try and access your corporate infrastructure in this current space that we find ourselves in. Based on the user context, data access controls, location, application, and the device posture. We're going to use those things: user context, data access control, location, physical location of the device, the application, and the device posture to do those things. And if we do it correctly, we can actually implement password elimination, which is great because passwords are one of the number one causes of compromises within infrastructure. So that being said, let me offer this disclaimer. The demonstration or inclusion of vendor solutions is solely for the purposes of helping the end user, yourself, and your end users understand the implementation of the technology, and is not an endorsement of that solution in any way. This is not an evaluative report. We are not saying buy this solution. We are not saying this is the best one in a Wave or Nowtech or any of that. This is literally, these are some solutions that the vendors were offering based on our research. We chose a few, and there's 100+ of them that we could have chosen, but we don't have the time to do all 100-something demonstrations. So this is the ones that were available, the vendors that were willing to jump on the phone and allow us to access those applications and use them without paying for licenses. Just so that you can understand what's going on here. So under no circumstances should anyone, including the vendors that might listen to this, think that these are endorsements of a product. These are simply demonstrations of what's out there on the market and letting folks know what they can expect as they're deployed in these particular representative scenarios. So what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate an SDP solution. We're going to have a quick run through on what the administrative side of that looks like. And the reason I'm doing that is to show you what you can kind of expect for your IT people putting this in place, and they can understand how those entitlements and those things work on these type of solutions. And it's pretty broadly applicable across the entirety of SDP solutions. We're going to look at a no password login based on basically authenticating on my phone, being good to go when I'm on the system. And then we're going to look at a remote sort of browser-based remote workforce solution where the end user is not really doing anything other than firing up their browser and going to the internet. Everything is handled on the back end. All the applications are served up, all the security. It's basically removing all the load on the end user to do security configuration. So with that being said, trust me, I'm a doctor. Hopefully we get through this without too many blips and fails, but it shouldn't be that hard to really download these and get them up and running. So that being said, stand by for a demonstration of some Zero Trust remote workforce solutions. Okay, welcome back to the Zero Trust Remote Workforce demo. So what you're looking at here is a virtual environment that we've constructed that is just emblematic of virtual infrastructure. Basically, the whole point of this is to say we can take this machine and go to the internet. And what you notice here is this is not necessarily gaming the system. We have switches, we have firewall, we have a switch and a firewall. We have a clean Windows 10 base. We have Ubuntu machines, that type of thing. So for this particular instance, since most of the folks that you typically would encounter are either going to be on a Mac or a Windows, I'm going to do this SDP demonstration with a Windows 10 machine. So here we are with our Windows machine. You can see it's got Windows 10 Update. It's not running antivirus. This is by no means a bulletproof machine. It's just on the internet, but you can notice from that prior instance that I showed, there are firewalls in front of it. There are switches and configurations to make this thing sort of micro-segmented. So this would be my end user workstation in that environment. And the reason that I think it's worth pointing that out is there are very specific rules that I wrote to configure those switches and firewalls and everything else to make this thing talk to the internet. And just to show you that it is actively talking to the internet, let me open up a window here, and let's go to CNN.com, and there it is talking to the internet, doing internet-y things. Here's your news for today. Here's USAtoday.com. There's your USA stuff. So this is active on the internet. It is not a fake machine, etc. So normally, when you think about your end users and how they're going to deploy these type of solutions for VPN, it's a pretty laborious process of getting VPN stuff out to them, the configuration issues, all the other things that you're trying to get into, the follow on and dive in to make all that work. And I would have login, and any rule that I had running on any of that other infrastructure, which were switches and firewalls and routers and those type of things, would cause blips in that. when we get into software-defined perimeter, because of the way the configuration works and because we're using the virtualization and the dynamism of the internet and virtual systems themselves to route packets and move them around, it's much less laborious. So that being said, here's basically the install steps for the AppGate SDP controller, which again is not an endorsement of anyone's product. They were just willing to let us jump on first, and because we've covered them in past research, we thought we had a pretty good understanding of their place in the market. And again, just to show the difference between when you're on SDP and when you're not, here is a simple netstat tac rn. You can see the interface list here. You can see the routes. You can see, the IPv6 tables. Nothing really amazing. When we're at that, we can also, ping Google.com. There you go. There's your ping, etc. So let's see what changes as we put this thing into play. All I'm going to do is show you where the download is for this client. I downloaded it a minute ago. Nothing major, but I'll show you what it looks like. It's literally this simple. You go to the site, AppGate. This is their SDP where you download the software. Everyone should be very familiar with this. Of course, the other side of this is if you're doing this with corporate push, you would push this out to your users. Or you can point them to this to go get it. But there's virtual ISOs, there's OpenStack, there's generic. Because they're software defined, they've pretty much got what you would think would be available here. You've got access to the run-throughs on how to do this, what to do, where to click. Here's the client software. The client software is what I want because I'm doing client stuff. This is my Windows machine. Right here, I want the Windows full client. Now there are light clients and there is an older client. Obviously you want the newest one, so let's get the full client. There it is, it's downloading. You've seen this 10,000 times before. Blip, blip, blip. Life goes on. Let's look at the install. Sure, I want to let this thing do what it's doing. Here's your walk through your wizard. It's going to ask you to do the license agreement. Should be very familiar with this. It's going to run through upgrade. And it's going to ask you, just like every other application any user's ever used, it's going to say, do you want to run this thing? Yes, I want to run it. Here I go, privacy notice, may collect data, follow on from that, approve, put your name in there. You would put your name, let's say Chase, super easy, use provided link or configure manually. Now I've already got the downloaded configuration stuff that I needed from AppGate, so I'll show you what the client actually looks like itself. Okay, and we're back. Basically, I just took a little blip there because obviously with software, there's always updates. I didn't want to run everybody through a 2-minute update when I just downloaded this client. So that's just how things happen, but no big deal. Anyway, here we are. Here is my AppGate SDP installed, which basically what you're looking at, and I'll log in just to show you that I'm not gaming the system here. There's what was created through the AD and everything else taking place on the far end. And basically the way that this demo is working is AppGate corporate is kind of acting as my company. I am a remote user that they have provisioned this stuff for. So just like you would do with your remote users, you would be the corporate side, they would be the home office side. You would set this up for them. You would go through your AD, do all that stuff, and here would be the follow-on. So let's authenticate. Here's my username and password. And of course, if you've got a MFA provider or something else that's tied to this through that AD backend, you would be prompted for an MFA authentication or something like that. I haven't done that in this particular instance because I didn't feel like setting it up on this one because I'm doing demos on passwordless stuff anyway. So I guess you could call it, this was the lazy demonstration. The AppGate has all that stuff on their sites if you're interested. But what you'll see here is there's me, C. Cunningham. This is a Forrester demo. You can see down below, this is what I have been entitled to get to. So Azure, London, controllers in Northern Virginia, there's a demo diagram, Key Vault, S3 buckets, and Splunk, because that's what they provisioned me. That's what I've got access to. So within that, if we go back and we look at our command prompt and run the same commands that we did before, I still can ping Google. Internet still works like it was happening just a while ago. If I do my netstat now, you'll notice that there's a lot more stuff there in my netstat. So let's go look through that real quickly. And what you'll see in here is there's all these other IPs that have been added that I didn't go off and add. I didn't configure anything. I didn't change anything on my end. I didn't have to go in and click this to do that or whatever else. This was all handled on the back end because of the way that these systems work. So there's a whole bunch of IP addresses that you'll notice that I now have access to. These are direct pipes to get me there, but they're only going to allow me to go from here to there, and that's that. Rather than direct pipe to a corporate internet infrastructure, and then I got whatever I got because I'm there and because of my authentication and everything else. So what we can do is we can go over here and look again at the SDP controller and go into About and look at the entitlements to see what I'm entitled to. So you can see here, you know, MySQL Server access in AWS Ireland, the actions that they will allow, and always. So if I need to get to that MySQL server, I'm good to go. All I got to do is throw that in and jump in. And so here we are looking at this now. You can see what I'm entitled to look at. I have 59 entitlements, which obviously is pretty excessive, but the point of this is the folks over at AppGate gave me access to all kinds of stuff just for the purposes of demonstration. But what you can see is the way these things are configured, and this is all done software based. You know, you can see here's the site, there are the actions which are allowed, there's the conditions under which that will occur. And what I think is worth noting here is AppGate appliance OTP always. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, if I'm trying to SSH to the appliances in AWS Ireland, it will allow me to do these things. However, it's going to say you need to do an OTP, which is going to be one-time password. And what you'll also notice is looking at this, you can see, okay, well, telemetry server admin access, site AWS London action, okay, condition always. So for the purposes of that, let's go look at that particular IP address and see what we can get to there. So there it is, 10.205.110. You know, bingo, I can get to it, no problem. That's my access. There's all my sensors kicking on. Here's what's going on. This is for the purposes of their honeypot or whatever. But the point is just to show you how easy that was. Notice I didn't do another login. I didn't go and fire up another VPN controller or anything else. It just did its thing and made it work. Same deal where if I go down into, let's find one that's a little further in to show, you know, block ICMP, block TCP to 10.201.2.0, conditions, no open ticket. So I'll grab that IP address as well. Whoops. And of course, like I said, this is an actual demo, so sometimes things be a little blippy. You know, let's try and go to that and right there you'll see message, AppGate SDP has a message for you. Okay, well, what's my message, AppGate? Oh, it says AppGate access resource denied because there's no open service ticket. So you could go to ServiceNow and get that fixed. Okay, confirmed, no problem, life goes on, etc., etc. Very typical. One more quick sort of point to note here. Let's find one where it's telling us we need like an MFA or an OTP login or something like that. So here's one, SSH to appliances in AWS Virginia, access allow on port 22, OTP always. Great. Here's one that says require reason. Okay, well, let's go check this one out that says require reason. What is that going to do for us? You know, provide reason. Well, why do you need to get access to this? I need access because I am a developer or developer. And then submit my reason, support web, things go on from there. Okay, so we kind of ran through a few things of the different configurations, but notice as the user, I didn't really see anything change. I just did what I normally do, blah, blah, blah. So just quickly on the admin side of this and why I think it's worth paying attention to these things and knowing what's going on back there is here's how everything was provisioned for me. So they gave me access to AD, there's a demo diagram, key, blah, blah, blah. Really this controller, this is what I wanted to show from the admin side. Now the demo diagram, this is basically what's happening. So there's the user, here's the AppGate thing doing the AppGate stuff, and it's basically brokering all these connections, and it's keeping you bounded. It's keeping you within that tunnel, and you can see the integration with ServiceNow. Here's all the identity and access management stuff. Here's our internet. So the way that all this is working is totally hidden from my point. All I know is I'm doing my work. I'm doing my job. On the dashboard side, you can see what I have access to. All these gateways, controllers, log servers, IoT connectors. Here's the appliance stuff. There's your entitlement list, active server, right, username. There's me, C. Cunningham. That's me. So if I go up here and go look at C. Cunningham, this is where you're doing all that configuration on the back end. And you'll notice, this is it, session details, etc. This is all the magic that's taking place behind this. You can see those are what's been entitled to me. And down here is what I think is interesting too. A lot of folks will have questions about, well, what sort of telemetry, what sort of information do you get that can be useful? Well, client, IP, connect time, geo IP, physically, where was it? Did it make sense? What's my IPv4 tunneled IP address? And then if we go down further, here's the login information. Here's the first and last name. Here's the group stuff that I've been applied to, all the AD. Here's my device stuff, which I think is of definite note. AV inspect, there it's telling you what's there. Client IPs. Is it also looking, okay, it's checking to say, do I have Cylance? If I have Cylance, then authenticate me. Or if I don't have Cylance, don't authenticate me based on whatever rule you configure. Is it Kaspersky? All those things, is calculator running? Like all those things that could be indicative of this shouldn't connect to me. It's checking to make sure that happens before it allows that connection to take place. There's a Symantec, there's a Trend Micro, there's a Sophos. So all pretty cut and dry, but I'm not doing anything as the end user. It's just doing its stuff. If you go into the operations side, you can see everything that's here. And there you go. Like you can see the entitlements, you can see what's aligned. You can go into this system, and you can check for MFA providers. Which ones do you want to turn on? Which ones do you want to turn off? Do you want to make admins do multi-factor, which would probably be a really important thing to do. What sites, what appliances, what things would you like them to be able to get to? And it's not excessively difficult to run any of this stuff. Just requires a little bit of run through, and you can follow the help desk guides or the online documentation. You can see here's the users and devices, Chase, local, C. Cunningham, SDP demo. There's my machine, tokens that have been subscribed, blacklisted users, onboarded devices. There's my logs, everything that I would need to get into. And if we do a slightly further dive on the operations, I believe it is. Yes, you can even go in here and look at the entitlements and the conditions and the policies. And they have this interesting function, which is ring fencing, where you can apply a ring fencing rule around. Built-in ring fencing rule to block all traffic on the device replaces the old ring fencing flag. What to block, what not to block, how to configure that. If you have a script that you want to run, turn on the script, make the script do what it's supposed to do to help things up, move better, easier, faster, etc. So that's a really quick run through on what the admin side of this thing looks like. Obviously, you could go way down the rabbit hole. There's lots of configurations there. But for the end users and for the folks that are going to leverage the system, really, as long as they're using it, they're not going to notice that anything's taking place. One login, everything else happens with the magic at the back end. you're doing what you need to do and life goes on. That is a software-defined perimeter demonstration related to enabling ZT for a remote end user.